several of us have been, and I know many of you have been gathered together kind of thinking about not just how do we respond to all of these community requests to talk to us about the changes in public charge, but wanting to change the focus to looking at how do we build trust, how do we connect immigrants with public benefits. And let's see if I can. So we were thinking that what we wanted to accomplish today was, one, promoting public benefit understanding and use by immigrants. And we want to provide OLC and LASSO kind of staff written materials so that they feel comfortable spreading the positive message about public benefits with immigrants and really kind of rebuilding that trust. And we wanted to have folks that have been doing this for a while kind of share and brainstorm about best practices about how to talk with communities about public benefits to help them feel comfortable knowing what's out there, and how to apply for them and what might be good for them and their families. We also do kind of want people to know the basics about the changes to public charge so that you can answer people's questions about that. And so the main thing I think that we wanted to try to introduce is this change in focus, in that answering people's questions about public charge, but how can we think about this in a new way? And so we brainstormed with many of you, with different groups of workers and families, listening to kind of different national groups about what their ideas were about messaging. And so we're now thinking about how do we talk in a more positive way to help motivate families to access the benefits, to keep them healthy and stable, to have them feel like they deserve public benefits and access to community resources, and that they access those benefits and get those public benefits with confidence. And Susanna, I don't know if you have access to this. I can't remember which slides you were going to do.
You know what, Lori, I'm back.
Oh, wonderful.
I am so sorry. Did I mention I'm having really terrible internet problems this week? So if you don't mind, would you mind if I shared my screen and then okay. Great. Let's just, I'm so sorry. I really hope that this doesn't happen again. Give me 1 second. Oh, you know what? It's not going to let me share my screen because I think now I just joined. I'm not the organizer anymore. Okay, Lori, I think you need to share again, and I will, I'll try to manage say who's.
You should be able to, Beth, but the settings were that everybody could share. But maybe it doesn't matter. Lori has it shared.
Yeah. At any rate, so I'll go fast since I've wasted a bunch of time with my internet problems, but there's a reason that we're shifting our messaging and our focus talking about this. And a large part of it is that during the Trump years, the truth is that public charge and immigration enforcement created just huge amounts of fear in immigrant communities. And as a result of that, immigrant communities in Oregon and all over the United States are going without public benefits and other kinds of community resources that they truly need and they are eligible for and they should be getting, but they are afraid to get. So these are just a couple of slides to just emphasize how important it is. So SNAP, TANF, and Medicaid usage is down and much farther down in usage by non-citizens. Could you go to the next slide, Lori? There's fewer children are enrolled in Medicaid than they were previously. Next slide, please. And then even just basic food benefits and COVID benefits are like COVID treatment and vaccination and testing are like the rates of access by immigrant communities is much lower, and it's just that is truly, it's terrible. And so that's why we're trying to change our messaging to address this problem that's basically been created. And sorry. Okay, and then the other reason that we're changing our messaging and we're really trying to really have a push to present on these topics is because we have good news to share. And that is so important that we share the good news with the communities that we serve. And the good news is that as of March 9th of this year, the expanded, harmful, racist public charge rule became permanently blocked. So the rule that caused so much fear and caused people to be afraid to access benefits is gone. And we really need to,
So I think that what we want to turn to now is that several of us have kind of developed with ideas from lots of people a draft PowerPoint, a template PowerPoint that we're hoping that we'll get lots of ideas from all of you to further shape it, but a PowerPoint that people might be able to use in full or in part when they're asked by different community groups to talk about connecting immigrants with public resources. So I think we'll switch now to I think we're going to do the PowerPoint first, and then we'll hear from the panel about their suggestions about kind of on the ground, what are some great ways what are some helpful hints to talk to folks about this? I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to share the other one. And maybe, I guess I'm wondering if maybe while we're waiting for Beth to come back, is maybe we could flip and do, what do you think, Susanna? Should we do the panel before we do the PowerPoint?
Well, hi, everyone. If you want, we can try to wait to see if Beth can reconnect, and I can start talking about the other PowerPoint in the meantime.
Great, and I'll bring it up so we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Susanna, do you mind? I want to make sure I have the most recent version. Can you send me the email with her last share, and then I can bring it up?
Oh, sure. I just sent it to you.
Okay, great. You know, it's in a, I can't click on it the way that it is. Let's see. Let's see if I can find it. This is a good reminder of figuring technology things out. Or maybe Kelsey, could you share, could you make Susanna the host and then she could bring it up?
So
Oh, Beth just
Beth is
connected now.
okay. So Beth, we're just trying to sort out the screen sharing for the model presentation. You are muted if you're trying to talk.
I was trying to talk, thank you. And again, I'm so sorry about this. I cannot explain what's happening to my internet. So should I try sharing my screen and then the notes will show up? Would that help, Susanna?
Yeah, Beth, the second PowerPoint, please, if you could.
Oops. Okay.
Yeah,
Are we
perfect.
at the beginning? Again, I'm so sorry, everybody.
Yes, I'm so sorry. But let's go through this PowerPoint real quick. And again, like Lori mentioned before, while we're going through it, please think of yourself as a presenter and the type of information that you would need in order to feel more comfortable presenting on this topic. So this first slide, it's just the beginning of the presentation. We decided to start this presentation with the title Apoyo para Todos, or support for everyone, so that from the beginning of our presentation, we can start moving away from, moving away or reducing the fear surrounding public charge. And especially now that the Trump era rule is gone, we want to encourage people to get public benefits that they deserve, need, and have earned in order to support themselves and their families. You will also notice that each slide comes with its own suggested script, because again, we want to acknowledge that everyone has different levels of experience on this topic. So we want to be able to also provide that extra support in case you do want to do this presentation on your own. And of course, the script can be changed to your own liking or to whatever would work best for you. And so now if we move on to the second slide, Beth. So the second slide, will be very specific to you, depending on whether you work for OLC or LASSO. And if you want to make the information very specific to your office, you can also do that. And then moving on to the third slide, we wanted to include this reminder because of a subject that we'll touch more on later on during this presentation. But basically, we thought about adding this slide to the presentation to remind our audience that the information we'll be giving out during these type of presentations are just general information, and that we unfortunately cannot give legal advice in public spaces. And also just to remind folks that if they do have a specific question that might translate into legal advice, that we would love for them to reach out to one of our individual offices so that they could get that legal advice that they need. But again, I think this slide could also be very specific to the type of presentation you are doing. So you can decide to keep it or delete it, whatever works for you. We just thought it might help. And then the next slide, we decided to include this slide because we thought that a good way to start the presentation, especially with a topic like this that is surrounded by a lot of myths and fears and all types of distrust, which are all completely understandable. We thought that it would be a good idea to hear from folks about what they've heard about public charge. But again, for this slide, you'll decide to keep or delete depending on the type of presentation you're making, and also on how comfortable you feel about asking this question and starting the discussion with your audience. And now I'll pass the mic over to Beth, who is going to talk to us about the public charge rule.
I'm going to try really hard to talk to you about this public charge rule. So the next slide is designed to set up the discussion to start talking about the good news about public charge. And just so you all know, we debated a lot whether to talk about public charge at the beginning of this presentation or to talk about it later and like de-emphasize it. But from input we got from lots of folks and our own best judgment is that I think we have to get the scary part out of the way so that people can listen without fear to the information about public benefits. So we're talking about it first. And the very first thing to share is good news that the old, the expanded harmful public charge, very harmful public charge rule is blocked now, permanently blocked. And then now it doesn't mean, unfortunately, it doesn't mean there's no public charge rule, but we go back to the old public charge rule. And the message about the old public charge rule, it is very limited. It affects very few people. It applies in very few circumstances. And even if it does apply, it only considers very, very few benefits. And so those are the concepts that we're going to talk about in this presentation. So that's what you would be getting across with this slide. Basically, what we want everybody to know is that people should be much less worried about public charge now. It really is, it should be almost a non-issue for many, many people, for most people. And then, and so the next slide, that the next part of the discussion that makes sense for folks is to talk about what is public charge. There's a lot of people who are not clear on the very basic idea of what is public charge, and there's a good reason for that. People are confused because it's confusing and it's complicated and it's not straightforward. So everybody, I mean, we try really hard in presentations to make nobody feel bad for not understanding or for being confused. These rules are kind of designed to be confusing and scary. But all that being said, it's helpful to know what is public charge. So public charge is a test. This is the suggested script, is that you explain to people that it's a test that immigration officials apply when they're deciding if an immigrant will be permitted to enter or permitted to stay in this country. And the test itself is when a federal immigration officer is deciding whether an immigrant is going to, in the future, be totally dependent on government benefits for survival. So that's the actual test. And again, I'd encourage emphasizing as often as possible that during the last administration, the rule was expanded and made more harmful, but that rule is gone now. And in the new administration, the bad rule is completely blocked, and we're back to the old rule, which is extremely limited. So the next concept is that it makes sense to talk about is, so who does it apply to? Who does this public charge concept apply to? And the message is that it applies to very few people. And right off the top, it's helpful to talk to communities about all the categories of immigrants that are completely exempt from the public charge rule, because there are a lot of those categories. So so all the types of immigrants that are on here, and this isn't even a complete list, we call them humanitarian immigrants, so refugees and asylees, victims of trafficking, VAWA self-petitioners, special immigrant juveniles. Those folks don't have to worry about public charge. It doesn't apply to them. Public charge rule also does not apply to people who are already lawful permanent residents, so they already have their green cards. I cannot tell you how much confusion there is about this. People who already have their green cards are still going without food or other necessary community resources because they just have this amorphous fear of public charge. If you're an LPR already, unless you're going to leave the country and be outside the country for more than 6 months or 180 days, you don't have to worry about public charge. People who are LPRs have to renew their green cards periodically. Renewing your green card does not include any public charge inquiry at all. So that's another source of confusion in the community. When people who are already LPRs apply to become a citizen, that's otherwise known as they apply for naturalization. Public charge rules do not apply to the naturalization process. They're statutorily completely separate. So there's no problem applying to be a citizen. No one will ask them any public charge questions. So those are important concepts to communicate. And then the next slide is about when does it apply? It actually helps in explaining who does public charge apply to really understand when the test is applied. And the message here is that public charge test really only applies in very limited situations. So on this slide are the 3 times when public charge even applies. So it applies if you're outside the US and you're applying to enter, you have to get permission to come here. If you're inside the US and you're applying to become an LPR, a lawful permanent resident, apply to get your green card, the public charge test will be applied. If you're an LPR, as we just mentioned, and you leave the country for at least 180 days, and then you're coming back to the US upon re-entry, the public charge test may be applied again. That's it. So if you're talking to a community and people are thinking, well, I'm not applying to become an LPR anytime soon because I don't really have a path to apply to become an LPR. That should be a way for people to understand that I don't really have any public charge concern right now. And again, so one thing to remind people is that those humanitarian immigrants we talked about before for whom public charge doesn't apply, like refugees or asylees or VAWA petitioners, they actually do apply to become LPRs, right? That's part of the process for those humanitarian immigrants. But because they have this humanitarian immigrant status, they still are a refugee or a VAWA self-petitioner. They don't face a public charge test when they change to be an LPR. So even though those people do apply to become an LPR, they're exempt from the public charge test. So it's helpful to point that out. And that's in the suggested script to make sure people remember that. And then kind of the last slide about public charge is a slide communicating that as far as public benefits go, the public charge test now that we're back to only applying the old, very limited rule, only applies to 3 public benefits. And these are the 3. TANF, which is temporary assistance to needy families, and that's a monthly cash benefit for very low income families, people with children. SSI, which is supplemental security income for people who are found to be disabled and don't have much of a work history. And then long-term care in an institution. Other than those 3 benefits, nothing will be considered in a public charge test. This is a very big difference from the rule that is now blocked. The rule that's now blocked had a very long list of benefits that could be considered. We're back to this very limited rule. These 3 are it. And as hard as this is to really explain, most of the people who could possibly face a public charge test, so if you think back a couple slides, people who still need to apply to become an LPR or who are entering the country, they don't qualify for any of those 3 benefits. They don't qualify for TANF for themselves, they don't qualify for SSI for themselves, and they don't qualify for long-term care in an institution for themselves. They may be getting those benefits for their citizen children, but for the most part, that doesn't count against an immigrant and their public charge test. It should be irrelevant unless those forms of support like TANF or SSI were basically like the sole source of income for the whole family. Then it could be considered in a public charge test. But for the most part, kids getting benefits, that is fine. It won't reflect on the immigrant's public charge test. And if you notice on the slide, it says, even if you get these 3 benefits for yourself or for your children, you still might be fine. That does not mean you're automatically going to be considered a public charge when you face a public charge test. The public charge test is, the actual test requires that immigration officials look at they call it the totality of the circumstances. And by the way, all of this is in the suggested script, so it'll be provided to you so you can become familiar with it and remind yourself. But the totality of the circumstances means that they can't just say, oh, you got TANF 10 years ago, so you're going to be a public charge. That's not it at all. They have to consider a wide range of circumstances and all in all look at whether you are likely in the future to be totally dependent on public benefits for your survival. So the fact that someone got public benefits or their children got public benefits and that was the sole source of income for the family in the past does not mean that someone will necessarily be found to be a public charge in the future. And in fact, there are some times when getting benefits during tough times might lead to more stability for a family in the long run, so that when an immigrant does eventually apply to become a lawful permanent resident, they're in better shape for their public charge test than they would have been if they just like continued to struggle and barely hang on and have a lot of instability in their lives. So yeah, so really want to try to get that message across to people that it's such a limited rule right now. It applies to so few people in so few circumstances. But even if people do actually need to face the public charge test and they've gotten some of these benefits, that does not mean that they will be found a public charge. All right, so so we got feedback, really good feedback from folks that we talked to that said really for presentations like this, interaction is necessary to make it more interesting and also to keep people involved. And also it might be a way to check like how well your message is getting through. So we put in a few true or false kinds of slides here. We don't really need to go through, I'll just click through them real fast. But we also had some good advice that when you're doing like kind of true or false questions, make sure you're always, the message even in writing is positive to the extent it can be positive, so that people don't accidentally come away with a feeling like, oh gosh, it's something, that's false, that's not right. Just we want to even use our polling questions or true or false questions to emphasize the message that we're trying to send. If you want to skip, when you do this presentation, if you want to not do the true and false and you want to do a Zoom poll, if you're doing this by Zoom, please do that. This is all can be arranged how you want it to be. But I just these are some examples of things like OHP, cover all kids, emergency Medicaid, COVID-19, treatment, testing, and vaccination do not count in a public charge test. True. All right, so we're now going to transition away from talking about public charge and talk about public benefits and community resources. And I'm going to hand it over to Lori to talk about that.
So now is when we get to focus on the good news and where we can talk more about, well, what are public benefits and what are the public benefits that are available to people and why are they so important to families? Go to the next slide. And some people may not be familiar with just kind of the basics of what do we mean by public benefits. So it might be worth just taking a moment to kind of be, well, what are some public benefits? And you might even want to ask the audience if you're doing like a Zoom presentation or hopefully soon an in-person presentation, and just what are some examples of different kinds of public benefits, just to see what their thoughts are. And obviously, public benefits are mainly food, healthcare, and other help that's provided by the government. And one thing is it might also be good just to kind of remind people that everyone gets public benefits, right? Like it's not just a matter of low-income people asking for assistance, but we all benefit from roads and lights and libraries and the fire department. And schools and universities, and those are all forms of public benefits that people receive. And some of the things that we're talking about today are just a small portion of the different kinds of resources that are available for communities. Let's go to the next one. we also thought it would be helpful to kind of just take a moment to ask folks, well, who funds these public benefits, right? Where does the money come from? And the answer is all of us, right? That all of us who work at some point, and our teenagers that work and our parents that work, have money taken out of their paycheck to go towards paying taxes that pay for all of these resources. And so really, it's not something that we're getting kind of from this other source. It's something that we're kind of sharing with one another. It's truly a public resource that we're all contributing and we're all receiving. Next slide. Susanna?
Yes, and that is my slide. So now that we've seen some of the public benefits that are available, let's talk about why benefits are so important and why community resources actually do help people. Sabeth, what do you mean? Yeah, thank you. So I mean, this slide is pretty straightforward. You know, benefits are important because these safety nets programs, like the ones we mentioned before, they help lift kids out of poverty and are critical to help keep people safe and healthy. So if you want to expand more on that, you could, but you could also just read what the slide says. We believe that by just saying that, you could make a very impactful point. And then the next slide. Again, in order to achieve our goal of moving away from the fear factor that comes with public charge and public benefits, we thought that it would be a good idea if we listed different life events, all of which could happen to any of us throughout our lives that are either out of our control or, you know, that might be under our control, but that at the end of the day, they're just situations that put us in a very vulnerable situation where we might just need a little help or that extra push. And so some of the life-changing events that we've included are events like going back to school or moving to a new city, losing your job or getting your hours reduced, having to care for an ill family member, or losing your home or getting evicted. These are all events that could happen to any of us, but it is important that folks understand that when we are going through these life-changing events, that it is okay that we seek for these benefits that are available to us, especially when we need them the most. And so the next slide it just basically summarizes some of the things we've discussed, like, you know, because we all pay for these benefits through our taxes, we are all deserving of these benefits. We know folks are hesitant to get these benefits, and we want them to know that they don't need to feel that way, because benefits are important, because they can help support our families during hard times, and also because that's what benefits are here for. And so then the next slide, oh, and that's actually Beth.
Sorry, the slides that Susanna just went through are kind of slides to try to destigmatize public benefits. There are a lot of communities, especially immigrant communities, who feel like it's bad to get benefits. It's a sign of failure, or it's something that could get you in trouble. So we've addressed the getting in trouble part, and then trying to address the stigmatization and just normalize it. This is what people, these community resources and public benefits are here for people to make sure that you know, during hard times, you have some support that you need. And then this next slide, we're kind of shifting into talking about, and by the way, immigrants are eligible for benefits. There's all different kinds of benefits, but if we've managed to actually convince people that to destigmatize benefits in people's minds, then the next question is, well, okay, if I'm okay with getting them, what can I get? What am I eligible for? So this is a time to remind people that there are some programs that don't consider immigration status at all. That children who are U.S. citizens can get public benefits even if their parents are not eligible, and that each program has different eligibility requirements. And basically, we're encouraging people to apply to see if they qualify based on their family's situations. So we do have a handout to share. That we'll include with the slides to you later. That is sort of community-friendly checklist for things that they could get that isn't a full list of all the benefits, but it will, but it can help people see, oh yeah, oh, I could get those things. I would qualify for that. So, so these slides go through just some examples. So we're encouraging you to just give people a little taste of things that they might be eligible for. So this is a list of some programs for all low-income people. So and you don't need any immigration status to get anything on these slides. So WIC is the nutrition supplement program for women, or actually it's pregnant people, breastfeeding people, and caregivers and guardians and kids under 5. Food boxes from the food bank, school, some free and reduced school meals, and pandemic EBT. These are just some examples of things you can get with no immigration status at all. And then the next slide is the same. These are things you get with no immigration status at all. But they're all medical programs. So Cover All Kids, and COWM is emergency Medicaid for adults. Pregnancy OHP, reproductive health care for free, irrespective of your immigration status. Charity care is every public hospital in the state is required to give charity care, irrespective of immigration status. And for people who are low income, and it's important that people know that every hospital has its own application, but everyone is eligible for that based on their income. I'm going to just take a second to talk about pregnancy OHP because I don't think everybody is super familiar with it. So if you're low income and you become pregnant and you're an adult, you qualify for full OHP benefits. So you get all your pregnancy care and birth and 60 days postpartum care is covered, but also every other aspect of healthcare that's covered by regular OHP is covered while a person is pregnant. And the reason I'm highlighting this is for some of our clients who are undocumented immigrants, this may be the only time they have access to full health care if they can't afford to pay for health insurance or they don't get it through a job. And so it's a really important benefit. We want to make sure that people are, obviously getting pregnancy care, but also like this may be the only time they get dental visits paid for. So make sure you're encouraging people to use those full benefits while they're pregnant and up to 60 days postpartum. And then housing help. These kinds of housing help, different immigration status requirements may apply to different things, but for the most part, if there's anybody eligible for a benefit in the household, any household member, then people are eligible for Section 8 and low-income housing. Rental assistance is sort of a new concept. And that is eligible to everybody irrespective of their immigration status. And that's really, really important right now as people have been struggling as a result of the pandemic and financial losses and job losses. We really want to encourage everybody to be applying for emergency for rental assistance. I'm not going to get into all the details of rental assistance and the eviction moratorium ending, et cetera. There are a bunch of really good trainings that OLC and LASSO have done. So I'm gonna refer you to those for the details. But we do want to make sure when we're doing community presentations that we're talking about it and making sure people know they can access it. And I think right now, maybe we'll take this out. I hope we get to take this out eventually, but right now, I think every time we talk to the community, our communities, we want to remind people that COVID-19 treatment, testing, and vaccination is fully covered in Oregon, no matter what your immigration status is. And I've also been careful to remind people that this should be repeat information, but there's no public charge issue with any healthcare benefits anymore, unless you're institutionalized in long-term care. So people can get this testing, treatment, and vaccination for free, and it has no public charge implications. And then we should also advise people about some of the really, really important tax benefits that are available right now to anybody with an ITIN. There's economic impact payments, which people have already been getting, but not all of our clients have accessed them at this point. So people can get about up to $1,400 per eligible person. And then the big one right now is the expanded child tax credit. So a parent, even if a parent only has an ITIN, if they have children with Social Security numbers, they're eligible to get this expanded child tax credit. And depending on their income, they can get up to $30,600 for each child under 5 and up to $3,000 for each child 17 or younger. And I'm going to pause for a second and just say, like, when I was thinking about this in terms of one of my clients that I've had in the last couple of years who had 5 children under the age of 5, which just like made my head want to explode to begin with, just thinking of having to take care of 5 kids under the age of 5. But when I added this up for her, if she applies for this child tax credit, it's going to be almost $20,000 for her family, which is, you know, this is it could be a once in a lifetime opportunity for people to get some money that they can use for stability and just maybe a nest egg or maybe paying down a debt. It's just so important. I think we really need to make sure we talk about it every time we talk to our clients right now. People will get it if they've already filed for taxes, but the IRS just created a portal where people can apply for the child tax credit even if they didn't need to file taxes. So now, thank goodness, there's an easier option even than filing taxes, because not all of our clients need to file taxes. If their income is really low, they might not be used to filing taxes. They can use this tool instead. There is absolutely no public charge problem with any tax credit. Tax credits are not public benefits. They've never fallen under the category of public benefits. So people do not have to worry about public charge if they're applying for these tax credit or economic impact payment or child tax credit. And I think it is incumbent on all of us to remind folks about unemployment benefits, to apply for unemployment benefits, to challenge a denial if they're denied and they feel like they were wrongly denied unemployment benefits. There is now, thanks to the good work of folks at both LASSO and OLC, there's now an online application for unemployment benefits in Spanish. And that wasn't true until just a couple months ago. And so there's an easier way to apply. Also largely based on the work of OLC and LASSO, the employment department created a special phone number where you can call and get a non-English speaker someone to talk to you in your own language. And there's also an email that people can email and say, I need a call back in with someone who speaks the language, my language, and tell them what language it is. So we wanted, I think a lot of people who don't speak English just were kind of cut out of unemployment benefits. They couldn't get through, couldn't get someone to speak to them in the language they understood, and so they gave up. And that's just awful. And so to the extent that we can kind of correct any misconceptions and encourage people to apply, you do need a work permit to qualify for unemployment benefits. So some of our clients don't qualify, but some of our clients do. And for those that do, this is a really important community resource public benefit that lots and lots of Oregonians have used in the last couple of years. And we don't want our immigrant clients to feel cut out of that if they don't need to be. I mentioned a handout. This is a client-facing handout that's too small to see on the screen. The purpose isn't to go through it right now, but we'll make this available both in English and in Spanish, just as a quick checklist so people can glance at it and say, oh, I could get this, even though I don't have any immigration status. Or I could get this, I have a work permit. And then we're also going to share with you a much more complicated and kind of wonky thing that's for you, for advocates. It's not client facing. It's not simple. It's just not a good client facing document, but it could be a really good tool for you to look at to figure out what your clients do and don't qualify for. This client facing document is not a complete list. Like there are lots of other things that people might be eligible for. This is a short list of highlights, sort of. Okay, these are some more to keep people engaged and interested, some more true and false questions. So just reminders, use them if you want to, change them into a Zoom poll if that works for you. Just sort of reminders that children up to age 19 can get Oregon Health Plan coverage no matter what their immigration status, and that is true. And same, COVID-19 testing. Couple more that, just reinforce the messages that we're trying to get across, that even if parents in a family are undocumented, if children are U.S. citizens, they qualify for food stamps, and you should get, people should get them. So, all right, now we talked about being eligible for benefits, talked about destigmatizing getting benefits, and then we talked about who might be eligible for benefits. So the next topic is moving on to just how do you apply best practices for applying and keeping up to date on your benefits. And I'm going to hand this over to Lori to talk about.
And we added this section just because it is kind of a nice concrete suggestions that people can use as they go to apply for benefits. Hopefully now we've kind of reduced their fears about public charge. We've shown them all these different benefits that they might be eligible for. Now we want to kind of prepare them for the process and hopefully prevent problems as they're going through the process. Next slide. So what are some things that people want to do when they're ready to apply for benefits? The first thing that you might want to suggest to folks is just getting organized, right? So people may want to, I think it's helpful to just get like a piece of paper and make a list of kind of all the key important information that people are going to need when they're applying for different kinds of benefits, kind of full names of family members, dates of birth, either social security numbers or other, maybe their ITIN, even just addresses. Another thing that people might need to get before they apply for benefits is an email address. They may not have that, but many applications will require them to have that. And so it's good for them to kind of go through the process to get one and figure out how to use it and how to check it. The other thing that is great to do as people are getting ready to apply for benefits is gather their documents. And what are some of the documents that they might want to pull together? It may be birth certificates, it may be the different forms of ID, it may be social security cards or their ITIN letters. And they also may need like a lease or information about utility payments. And it's great if they can have like a folder where they're keeping all of those documents together. The other thing then is for them to figure out, well, how do I figure out where to apply for these different benefits? And that's a hard question to answer. And I think basic information that we can share with people is, one, we'd really like to encourage people to use 211. We'd like that to be a good resource. And if it's not working, we need to know about it so we can help make it better. Obviously, the Department of Human Services is where people can apply for like food stamps and TANF and many of the benefits that they may be wanting to apply for. But I would also encourage people to reach out to kind of local community-based organizations like Mano a Mano in Salem and Avoca and Hermiston. And I think a lot of those organizations can be very helpful. Some of them have kind of the health navigators embedded in their organizations, but they can be kind of critical in helping point people not just to the kind of more official kind of government-based benefits, but also the local resources that might be available to help families. The other thing that I think is important for people to talk about is that when they are applying, that they, one, have the right to respect, right? That if they're not treated well, that they should let us know about that, let other people know about that. We want people to be treated well when they're applying for benefits. And part of being treated well is having access to getting communication in their own language, right? And so if their first language is an Indigenous language and they feel most comfortable communicating in that language, they can ask, like when they're applying for food stamps, that someone speak to them in that language. And we should be in supporting people to get access to those resources and ask them to please contact us if they're not getting good interpretation. And the other thing I think is that people can ask for help in applying. Sometimes people are handed a 34-page application that is quite overwhelming for many people. And so it's important that they feel comfortable asking for help to do that. And if they run into problems, we do want to encourage people to contact us so that we can help eliminate or at least try to reduce some of those barriers. Another thing that is important is for thinking about what kind of information that they can be asked to provide. For example, we've been talking about that sometimes that parents who file like taxes with an ITIN might not be eligible for food stamps themselves, but their children are very likely eligible if they're US citizens or have documents and they're low income. And in that circumstance, the parents don't need to provide their social security number, right? They would just need to provide them for the kids, but they would be asked to provide their income. But one thing that I think is important is that people can decide on what kind of evidence they want to submit to support their income. They may or may not have pay stubs that they want to share or tax returns, and maybe another way to do it is sometimes is a letter written by their employer that describes what their income is. So just letting people know that they have different options of providing that information can be helpful to them. Next slide. And then I think it is important not only just to remind people that when they do apply for benefits, asking them to get copies of the documents that they've provided, and if they can kind of write down the person that they spoke with and the date, just kind of keeping track of those things. But then it's also important to kind of take certain steps after they've applied. Some of it is just checking your mail, checking your email, and if you do get some follow-up correspondence, maybe asking you for additional information, that you respond on time. The other thing, just to let people know, right, is that sometimes benefit applications are denied, and oftentimes by mistake, right, in error. And so oftentimes it is very worth it to appeal decisions, or maybe there is an assessment of an overpayment. It may or may not be correct. And so we should let people know that we're happy to help evaluate situations, but they can always appeal, within the time period to preserve their rights, and then they can bring it to us and we can help them figure out if it seems like the decision was correct or not. And in some cases, we can represent them in a hearing. I think the other thing that is important for people to know about is that, certain benefits require people to report if there's been a change in their income, or if there's been a change in like the people who are living with them, who constitute their household. And so they should, when they're applying for benefits after they've been given those benefits, just check in and ask, what are the things that I need to report? How much of an increase in income do I need to report, and how do I report it? And then sometimes there's very tight timelines. Sometimes they need to report that within 10 days. And so they want to make sure to report those changes that they need to, and keep proof of kind of when and how they provided the information for the reporting. Next slide. So that's kind of the end of the substance of the presentation. In this slide, we were just providing folks some resources, mainly the Oregon, advocates, and Oregon Law Help website, some other additional national websites, and then of course the public benefits hotline number, which I think we definitely want to promote in these presentations as a way to get help and to ask questions that they have. We think it's, again, we hope that you kind of shape this presentation to how you like to do presentations, and depending on the amount of time you have, but we do think it's really important, if you can, to leave time for people to ask questions. And then the next slide is actually encouraging people to help share their feedback on the presentation in the chat if you're doing it by Zoom, just because we constantly want to be improving our message, improving our materials. And so hearing from folks about what was most helpful, what was confusing, what questions do they still have, will help us to keep refining this. And we'd also like to say that to all of you, if you have suggestions about, what slides maybe take out, which ones were a little confusing, where would you want more information, where would you want more information in the script, we definitely encourage you to share that feedback with us. And so now I think I'm passing it back to Susanna.
So I think we're going back to the other PowerPoint, right, Beth?
Yes, we are. And actually, I'll take it from here. I think now, now that we've gone through that's like the template PowerPoint presentation that you guys could give to in your communities about public benefits and public charge. And now we're going to just get some input from 3 people who have done a lot of talking about this issue in their communities that they serve, and have a lot of practical experience to share just in how people are thinking about these issues, what questions come up, what fears exist. And I do want to acknowledge there's a lot of other people in the program, both programs, that have also been talking a lot about this and have good information to share. These just happen to be three people who have a lot of good information to share and are available and willing to spend their time, which I really appreciate. So Valentin Sanchez from OLC, the Farm Worker Program, Maria Romero from OLC Ontario office, and Kelsey Heilman from the Portland Regional Office of OLC are all gonna spend a little time sort of sharing insights that they've gained from their time. And thank you so much. Valentin, would you like to start?
Yes, I'll be happy to. Thank you so much, Beth. Do you want me to just answer the questions that you posed in that email? You're on mute.
Yes, that would be great, Valentin. And anything you think is most pertinent, that would be wonderful. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Beth. And thank you, Lori, Susanna, and everyone else. The PowerPoint looks amazing. And it looks like you have incorporated a lot of suggestions from people. It looks great. In particular, I love, I believe it's slide number 4, where it asks what kinds of issues people have been hearing about in their own communities, because it does help us when we're trying to do targeted outreach to see whether there's specific questions that are arising from specific areas in the state of Oregon. And so just going back to the question that was posed in the email is, what do community think of when we talk about public benefits and public charge? A couple of things that I like to quickly mention. At least for the farm worker program, we work with I would say, pretty diverse farm worker population. We have, and we also serve not only farm workers, but also their family members. And we have farm workers who have different levels of educational attainment. When we think of people who Spanish is their native language in Mexico, I think we're looking at 6th, 7th grades. But when we talk about indigenous communities, the formal educational attainment is a lot lower. And also we have newer immigrants as well. And so both of these terminologies are somewhat terminologies that people haven't heard about before migrating to the United States. In Mexico, I believe they have what they call programas de desarrollo social. I think that would be the equivalent of public benefits. And just based on my experience speaking with both indigenous and non-indigenous farm workers, who have arrived, I would say, within the last 6-7 years, they have no solid understanding of what's public benefits and what's public charge. But when you start having a discussion with them, it makes it clear that they're concerned about being a public charge, but they just are not accustomed of using the public charge phrase. So for many, public charge and public benefits are going to be new terminologies. And in terms of, I guess the other question was any common questions you've gotten as you've been talking to people about these issues. I guess the way that people bring up these concerns, it's very different. Oftentimes people will ask, Valentin, ¿esto cómo me afectaría a mí, rather than say, how is seeking this public benefit, it's going to affect me if I'm going to be adjusting my status. And so that's usually the way that people bring up these issues. Esto de qué manera me podría afectar en el futuro. Those are the phrases that I keep hearing. And so when people talk about, yeah, tengo preocupaciones de que esto me pueda afectar, for the most part, they're talking about public charge and public benefits. And in terms of suggestions, I think I have no list of suggestions, but just having an opportunity for the communities that we serve to speak about their issues and concerns, I think it helps us kind of explain all of these great public benefits that they can qualify for, but they're just afraid of seeking these benefits. And also, I think that the immigration rhetoric that people come to the U.S. just to exhaust, the public benefits that exist, I think it has made its way into our Spanish-speaking community. And I think that has caused a lot of concerns, not only for people that could be affected by it, but also by people who definitely qualify for it and will not be effective by its use in any way. And so I think, just the one suggestion would be create a safe place for people to talk about these issues. And for the most part, you're not going to hear, I have concerns about public charge, but people will talk about it as, pero obteniendo esta ayuda, ¿cómo me afectaría a mí? I think that would be the equivalent of public charge in our Spanish-speaking communities.
Oh, Valentina, that was so incredibly helpful and insightful, and I really appreciate that. I want to make sure I didn't cut you off. Were you done?
Yeah, I was done. I mean, unless people have other specific questions, but yes, I was done.
Okay, well, let's move on to Maria then, and maybe we'll have time for questions coming up pretty soon. So Maria, are you here? I can't see everybody.
Yes, I'm here. I was trying to unmute myself here. Clicking on the wrong one. Hi, everybody. I'm Maria Romero. So I work out of the Ontario OLC office here in Eastern Oregon. So way across on the other side of the state. So when I was asked to just, give my opinions or my thoughts or what I had seen, on the issues that folks are having, it's really hard. Like Valentin explained it perfectly. People do not know, they don't use, like he said, the terminology of public benefits and public charges. And they don't know the requirements. They've changed so much. I mean, we heard, how, first it was just basic benefits that didn't qualify. Then they had all this list. And when people are applying for their immigration status, they do talk about, they have to be able to come to the U.S. and be able to support themselves. They do not know that when they're coming in to get their legal status, that all this only applies to them. They think it applies to their family. So they're in fear of applying for any type of benefits. They think, this is going to affect my immigration status, possibly get their legal status removed. There's folks that are in a waiting list to get their legal status, so they want nothing to do with any type of government benefits. There's just, all kinds of, information. I mean, things that they don't know what is going on and what is happening. And I think what we can do, like you said, just put out as much information as we can. And these presentations would be really really good for folks out in our community. I did come up with a couple of questions that I was asked in these past few years. Like I've had a single mom with 5 U.S. Citizen children. She didn't know what to do. She's working minimum wage. She wasn't making ends meet. And she asked me what could she do to get, what kind of help could she get? So what I did was we have a list of different agencies in our community. And so it has their the name, the address, the phone number. I gave her the list. I asked her to to call these folks, to call these agencies to find out what the requirements are. And if she does get denied, then she can give our office a call. I had another lady call, she had just barely gotten her legal status and she was having medical issues and wanted to know, can I get any type of benefits? Will they take my status away? So what I did, as Beth mentioned, there's an eligibility chart for benefits, which I went through and was very, very helpful. Thank you. And was able to get, she was able to get certain benefits because of her, of the status that she has. There's some folks that have to wait 5 years before they can get benefits. And again, they're thinking the whole family, cannot get benefits. So, this list, this chart is very helpful, for folks to have. And I think it's going to be mailed out to folks, emailed to folks. So you might want to review that, and that's very helpful. I had a mom that was very worried because she tested positive for COVID. She was in quarantine and she had no money to pay her rent. So I was able to provide her phone numbers, with agencies that were helping with emergency funds. And she was able to call and was able to receive the services. And, without that, she was like, I'm ready, anytime now to get my U visa status. Is this going to affect me? So there is a lot of immigration questions, involved with the public charge and public benefits. But there's a lot of times you just, you have to, if you're in a presentation, if you don't know the answer, you always can say, can you please, here's my card. Can you please call the office? We need to go over a little bit more information. Everybody's situation can be different. They're not all the same. So please, give us a call. And if we can't help you, we will get you to to agencies that may be able to provide information. If there's anything that I can help anybody with, I'm here to help. You can give me a call.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Maria. That was incredibly helpful. I'm hearing a weird echo on my line, but let me hand it over to Kelsey for some advice and suggestions too.
Thanks. So I just want to say how hopeful I think what both Valentin and Maria said, and you're going to hear me repeat of some stuff that they said because it's so true, it's worth repeating. So I just want to start by saying what Valentin said about like people in the community do not know public charge as public charge. And if you give a presentation on public charge without connecting it to the phrases that Valentin was talking about and people's concerns, it's that the message is going to sort of sail past them in an important way. So it is really important to ground that discussion in, I like to start not talking about public charge, but just sort of asking people like, what have you heard about how public benefits can affect you in the future? Exactly the phrase that Valentin was talking about. And then usually people will volunteer, right? Some of the things that they've heard. And then you can tell them there's a word for what you were talking about. It's like a technical term called public charge, and sort of explain, introduce that rather than grounding everything from the legal terminology, like start with the base of how people are experiencing these worries in their lives. With respect to public charge, people are really confused about what it means. I think most lawyers who work on this issue are really confused about what it means. Like I doubt that most attorneys in legal aid at Lasso and LLC could give a clear, like concise definition of what public charge is because it's so complicated, right? And so it's a little bit of a balancing act to address people's real concerns, but not go so far into the weeds that really you just raise a bunch more fear and a bunch more doubt about whether it's safe to apply. So when we message this stuff, my opinion is it's really important to focus the message in the way that Beth was talking about, which is like, this applies to very few people. It applies at limited times. And like, here's a whole host of like benefits that have nothing to do with this. And, there's a whole bunch of benefits you can get and it will never affect you in the future, except to the extent it will mean that your family is like healthier and, more economically stable and was able to get a good education and all the good things that everybody wants. So a couple of other things, it is really common. I think we're going to talk about this in a little bit. It's pretty common in my experience for like a bad individual story or rumor to pop up in these conversations when you're talking to people, and it can like take on a life of its own. So we're going to talk about how to respond when somebody is talking about like, something that happened to their cousin or like a friend that they know, or like their, brother-in-law's immigration attorney told them never to do this. And I just wanted to say that there's a flip side to that, which is that good stories are super powerful. And if there's any way when you're doing these presentations for there to be, if it's a safe space, for people to tell stories about what SNAP meant to them, what Section 8 means to them, what Medicaid has been meant to them, like that is such a powerful story for people to hear. And it can't come from the presenter if you don't have personal lived experience with it that you're willing to share. So if you are working with a community organization where there are people on staff who might know some community leaders who would be willing to talk about their experience, I just think that can really counteract those rumors, to have someone saying, look, I was worried about this stuff too, but here's why, here's my experience of going through, applying for SNAP, getting SNAP for my family, or like, free school meals for my kids, or WIC or whatever. And then if the group is small enough, another way to get at some of those experiences is you can do like a go around in the beginning, where I don't have everybody do it because that's a lot of pressure, but you can say, like, if you're willing to share, I'd love to hear from a few people in the audience, like, what's your name? I usually give them like a personal detail. So like, what are you looking forward to most about summer? And then tell us about an experience you've had with public benefits, good or bad, right? You or someone you know. And then people will share stories, and that sort of opens up the conversations. You can kind of get at the rumors that you want to take care of, and you also can address people's real negative experiences that they've had sometimes, right? That can bring up what Lori was talking about, like everybody has a right to be treated with respect. Everybody has a right to get services in their language. People's bad experiences can highlight those rights. And then people's good experiences are really powerful because it's so important to hear from your neighbors and community members how that's been, what's been useful. The true false quizzes and the idea of the Zoom call is a great idea. And when giving presentations in person, I think it is a really good idea not to just have it be on the slide, but to give people like an actual piece of paper. And, you don't force people to participate, but like, circle something, like have everybody sort of engage their fine motor skills and their brain in a different way. And it really, even the people who don't feel comfortable speaking up then will feel like that's an interactive part of the presentation. Another thing that you can do in these presentations is you can give them a hypothetical family and then say what programs are available to help this family. Like your neighbor, this is your neighbor, they come to you, right? And, mom is 7 months pregnant and they've got a 2-year-old and they've got an 8-year-old and, dad just lost his job, right? Like what's available? What could this family apply for? And then like, when does immigration status matter and when does it not matter, right? And that can be used to illustrate that which programs where immigration status doesn't matter, and you can sort of reiterate the stuff on public charge. I think the last thing I would say is public benefits are just so technical. And again, I'm going to echo Valentine's point, like just think about have really clear goals for what you want people to walk away from the presentation, like remembering. And it is just not realistic for anybody, regardless of their education level, to think that they're going to walk away knowing like what are the income and asset rules for 12 programs, right? Like none of us could absorb that information. And you know, we've all had a lot more education than a lot of the community members to whom we are presenting, right? So like what are your goals, what's realistic? And it's what you want to do is sort of open up possibilities for people, right? Like make them feel safer, make them feel curious, make them feel like they can safely apply, and here's how you do it, and here's how you assert your rights. And here's all the ways that these programs can really help support you and your family and put you in like a healthy and stable place where you can, you know, grow financially and have success and achieve all of those goals. So that's my thought.
If I could,
that's- Go ahead, Valentine.
yeah, if I could just, you know, go back to Kelsey's, you know, great suggestion of engaging the audience. You know, I have found it that when you start engaging people, as soon as you get into the Zoom call or, you know, get to the place where you're going to be presenting and start talking to people, getting to know them, asking them their names, that's when you start seeing more interactive discussions throughout the presentation. But when you dive into the presentation, you're 15 minutes into it and you suddenly realize, how am I going to engage people? I mean, it does take more work, but to the extent that you can start engaging people like at the beginning, I think that's going to help you, because people will feel safer and more comfortable asking questions and sharing their own experiences that will help you to illustrate or talk about the important topics in the presentation. And I have found this so useful. I'm pretty bad with names, so pre-COVID-19, I would always try to get 30 minutes before my presentation, greet people as they come in, write down their names, and then as I'm presenting, I can look at my sheet and say, oh, Juan is sitting to the left, Jose is sitting to the right, and that helps you, or will help you as a presenter.
Oh my gosh, I cannot thank you three enough. Those were incredibly helpful and insightful suggestions and advice and observations. It was really, really great. And we'll ask you to pipe in a little bit more farther in the presentation. Right now is the time that we set aside for questions from you all. You know how we've been talking about how you should really get some interaction and let people do something and engage their brains differently? Well, we didn't do that at all in this presentation because we were so worried about time. So we've saved it all up until right now. If you, I'm hoping you were jotting down questions. If you have questions about the community presentation, the template that we went through, if you have questions about what Maria and Valentine and Kelsey were suggesting, if you would like to, if there's something about public benefits or public charge that you want to know a little bit more about, now is the time. Let's see if anyone has some questions. If you would like to unmute, that would be fine. If you would like to put something in the chat to everybody, that'd be fine. It's a lot of information that we've been talking about, and we burned a bunch of time with my terrible internet connection. I'm so sorry about that. But anything in particular folks want to chime in about or ask about? Or we'll have, oh yeah. Yeah, Mary Ruth.
I'm wondering how you would like suggestions for the PowerPoint.
Yeah, we've got, we're gonna ask for your feedback. If maybe we could, email would be fantastic, because we'll do an update of this presentation based on your feedback before we even send out the slides. I guess so that would be wonderful. If people feel more comfortable emailing Susanna or Lori or I individually, that's fine. If you want to call any three of us, that's also fine. But yeah, I think does that sound okay? We really need your feedback, even like little minutia feedback. We would love to get, and we'll change the slides a little bit before we send them out to you based on all of your input. Any other questions? Anything that people want to know more about? Any of those community presentation slides that people feel like, I don't know if I would talk about that. I feel like I would need to understand a little bit more before I talk about it. By the way, if questions come up as you go through them, like if you're preparing for a presentation, please reach out. I do this all the time for people, and I know that Lori is happy to help, and Susana is happy to help. I bet Kelsey and Maria and Valentina would be willing to field questions too, although I don't have authority to actually offer their time. Okay, well, I'm gonna, and there are other experts like Maria Ruth. I totally rely on people who also have immigration law experience. This is a crossover topic. Like there are a lot of different legal issues that are implicated talking about public benefits and public charge. So lots of expertise is helpful. We're gonna, if we don't have questions, I don't see anything in the chat. I'm gonna move us on to the next slide, which is, we just have a couple more to go through. And I'm gonna hand over to Susana. We're gonna talk about a couple things that came up when Valentina and Kelsey and Maria were talking to some of the tough questions you might face or situations. So Susana, let me hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you. And one of the reasons why we also decided to add this slide was because, again, we want to acknowledge that everyone's understanding and expertise on the subject is very different. And we also recognize that, I recognize that this has happened to me, and I know that it has happened to other people on the call. And that is what to say if you don't know the answer from someone in your audience. And also the next slide, which also ties into this, I don't know if you could show it just real quick, Beth, what to say if someone challenges your information or what you are presenting. And so we've drafted some suggested responses for you in case you were ever to go through this. Like Kelsey said, it is pretty common, but we also wanted to hear from our guest speakers to see if you yourselves have been or have had the situation happen and how you've handled it in the past. I know Maria already shared a little bit about how she went through it. I don't know if you, Valentin or Kelsey, want to share more on that subject, or if anyone on this call too, because I bet it has happened with other subjects and other topics. How do you handle a conversation like that?
So I could start. I guess I haven't had anyone contradict me on public charge or public benefits, but in the many presentations that I have done around employment, workers' rights, I have found people who are supervisors in the audience, and usually you start realizing that soon once you start your presentation, because they will make comments such as, there's a lot of workers who are just too lazy to work, they don't work fast enough. So you kind of get a sense of who that person might be. If it's someone that is just trying to give you a hard time, I think the suggestions that you have on the PowerPoint is excellent. But when you have someone who's, extremely innocent and truly believe what they're saying is right, I think there are different ways in which you can respond in a very polite manner. Just going back to, talking about employment rights, laws are extremely complicated, and I always tell people, it just results is gonna depend on the facts. It's gonna have a lot of other factors that will contribute to the outcome of the case. But it is okay to say that is an excellent question. I don't know the answer, but we would be happy to talk to our attorneys and try to get you an answer. If it's someone who is just trying to, contradict to everything that you said, saying, yeah, esta información, we had, colleagues with, many years of experience that helped us prepare the presentation and the content. So it just depends on who that person is, but I think, it's okay to say, I don't know the answer. Sometimes we feel pressure to try to give an answer, but the smartest thing to do is just to say, yeah, that's a really, great question. I don't know the answer, but we can try to, get an answer from one of our experts and then call Beth.
Yeah, thank you so much, Valentina. That was a great response. Do we get any other volunteers?
This is me, Maria.
Yeah.
One of the things that Juana did in the presentation, a lot of the audience that they're presenting to, they always say, pues mi comadre, pues mi compadre dijo, right? And or my neighbor said, my family members did this. And so one thing that I always say is, we go by what the laws, the regulations are, and what the attorney, the information the attorney gives us. And you always have an opportunity or a chance to get a second opinion. But what we can do is we can, after the presentation, let's talk a little bit, and then that way, I can understand a little bit more of what your issue is and what the question is that you have, instead of, so my comadre said, or my compadre said, let's talk about your issue.
Yeah, I feel like that's how it shows up. It's not someone saying like, you're wrong, this is how it is. It's like, I don't know. I mean, Valentina was talking about the workers' rights presentation. I can't think of a great public benefits example, but, it's people saying like, I got fired, for no good reason. And I went back in and demanded my job back. And my boss knew I had rights, so he gave it back to me, right? And so then, that's that person's experience. You can't contradict that. And so you just sort of, I think focusing on, yeah, it's like, it is, everybody's situation is different. This is what the law says, like Maria was saying. And then what Valentina was saying about just like acknowledging if you don't know the answer, that's always the right thing to do. And probably everybody on this call knows this, but if you happen to be someone who's like a newer to giving these kinds of community presentations, people who've been doing these for decades get questions they don't know the answers to, right? You never stop getting questions you don't know the answer to. And so don't feel like because you're new, you can't say, I don't know, because people who are very experienced in this area regularly have to say, wow, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'll get back to you on it.
And I think there are going to be instances where what you're trying to relay has been misunderstood. And it is okay to also say, if you believe that, the way that your message came out was misinterpreted, it's always okay to say, lo siento si no pude explicarme bien. This is what I meant to say instead. I've done that a couple of times.
I'm going to pipe in here to just bring up one more really, really tough situation that does arise specifically in this public benefits and public charge presentation context. And that's when someone says, my immigration attorney said the opposite, or just my immigration attorney just told me not to get anything. And that's especially tough. And I'm just warning you because it does happen, because it's literally happening. I mentioned that this is a crossover issue. There's, it implicates immigration law, but it's also public benefits. It's also and it's just a variety of things. Immigration attorneys don't really usually don't know very much about public benefits for the most part. This public charge rule is kind of has a leg in both of those worlds, and that's kind of that's a tough question, because you don't want to be saying don't listen to your immigration lawyer, because that's we wouldn't say that, but we would say, you know, there's some, you know, there can be complicated factors that that might be very individual to your situation. I would love to talk to you about your individual situation. I'll be honest, sometimes we offer to talk to immigration attorneys to give like technical consulting, and you could offer that, you know, one of the attorneys could offer to talk to the immigration attorney to see if there was a misunderstanding, you know, not saying your immigration attorney is wrong, but then if at all possible, kind of go back to your general message and the points we're trying to get across, which is in general, and the points we're trying to get across is in general, everybody should be assuming that public charge they don't have to worry about, because the vast majority of people we're talking about can't get the public benefits that could implicate a public charge test. And just like we're just trying to kind of change the script. So let's not have everybody assume they need to be paralyzed by fear and not get any support. But in general, you know, people, you know, there's lots of reasons people don't have to worry about this. The rule is very limited now, and kind of just pivot back to the general message to the extent you can. But I thought I would just point that one out, because that one comes up fairly frequently about immigration attorneys. So,
And
go ahead,
Beth,
Maria.
can I
Yeah.
just, one of the things I found with that situation is it's helpful to clarify if they mean their immigration attorney or somebody on Facebook that put a video up, right? Because what I tell people is that if you met with a person one-on-one who is working on your case and they've told you something, then, you know, you should listen to them. If you have a concern, like we can talk one-on-one or I'll talk to them or something, but that you should not kind of watch a video on Facebook and then take that advice and use it to like make your own plan. You should call the public benefits hotline and say, this is my situation, right? What should I do? And get some individual advice.
That's right.
Because like the advice people give kind of in like large scale things, sometimes they're talking about a situation that doesn't apply to you, or sometimes they're just trying to be, you know, give kind of all of the types of situations that could occur. But if they don't know your specifics, then you really can't use that to make your personal decisions or something like that.
Yeah, excellent. That's such an excellent phrasing, Mary Ruth. Good job. Thank you for bringing that up. Susanna, should we go on, or do you want to?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say these are all really, really great suggestions. And if they're not already on our slides, we'll be adding them, and they'll also be added on the slide. On the last slide of the template we'll be sending you. That way you also have those suggestions in case you do want to make this presentation. You know, you'll know how to answer some of those questions. But yes, let's move on.
Okay, perfect. So now we're just, this is just the slide that's up is just a list of resources for you presenters. So we'll be sending these out. I'm going to get you a list of the acronyms of all the public benefits, because nothing makes people's eyes roll back in their head faster than a whole, you know, TANF and SSI and all these acronyms. If they don't mean something to you, that can be a barrier. So I don't want that to stop you from making presentations. We'll get the eligibility checklist, the public facing one and the not public facing one. Maria was talking about using the more complicated one. Public charge fact sheets, those are really helpful, and we've been giving them out, you know, for years now and updating them as needed. Those public charge fact sheets that we created are Oregon specific, and I think that's very helpful. Like Cover All Kids is an Oregon thing, and so there's no national material that talks about that. So it's helpful to have Oregon specific programs listed, but there's also great national information about public charge and public benefits, and I especially I'll send some resources or links to resources for the Protecting Immigrant Families campaign. That's a national, it's a national organization that's been doing just excellent work public charge and encouraging public benefits use when appropriate. And then we're also making up an FAQ, so frequently asked questions for you all, not to hand out to the community, but for you, so that you again feel prepared for questions that might come up. There's no way our FAQ can include everything, but to the extent that that we can put together things we know you're likely to get questions about, we'll create that. I would love your input. Well, we'll get to that next at any rate. And then lastly, the public benefits hotline is always a good referral that we give out so that people can call and try to get individualized advice. We do, we regularly get calls on the hotline about public charge, and almost all of them are from people who have absolutely nothing to worry about regarding public charge, but they're worrying about it and not getting something or getting off of a benefit that they don't need to get off of. So these are resources that will be coming to you just for your benefit. And then this slide is just a reminder that is, I didn't know it was going to be, but it's really repeating information that Maria and Valentin and Kelsey brought up, which is that your clients, so these issues that we're talking about, these issues can come up and maybe already exist in your other cases. So your family law cases or your housing cases, people are likely not coming to you, picking up the phone and saying, I'm worried about public charge, so I got off of my SNAP and TANF benefits, and now I can't pay rent because I bought food instead. Instead, they're calling up saying, I'm getting evicted for non-payment of rent. And so, the issues look different. These are some ways that public charge and public benefits issues are coming to you that don't use the words public charge and public benefits. So like people who have increased fear of leaving an abuser, and there's a real reluctance to access, like TADVS is one of the benefits that there's no immigration status requirement for, that can support survivors of domestic violence to be able to leave. It may show up as a school discipline issue. It may come into your office that way, or a special ed issue. So, child is getting in trouble at school. They're hungry. They're getting in trouble because they're not getting enough food at home. Like we said, people losing housing because they don't have enough resources to pay rent, or people enduring abusive workplace conditions because they're so afraid of losing income without realizing they could apply for unemployment benefits. Not that that's a complete wage replacement, as we know, but just to point this out, that you might want to take this information and integrate it into the rest of your practice, and not just think of it as a community presentation, but it's an issue that may be affecting your immigrant clients in all of your other cases. So. All right, next steps. Next steps are, please bring this information out to your community. We'll send you the PowerPoint slides we're going to do some updating based on your input. Take it, use it as a package, and offer it in outreach in your community. Add it into outreach that you're already doing. This can be customized to what you might be doing farm worker outreach in person, and so you wouldn't be using PowerPoint slides, but you could integrate the information into your outreach. It would be great to discuss these issues during intake, especially if you've got a case like where it's a non-payment of rent eviction case. Talk about, can you access some other money that might give you a financial buffer so you can pay your rent? And please refer people to resources. And Lori mentioned this when we were going through the template PowerPoint. Please, at the end of every presentation, please ask for feedback on the presentation and on the issues. And if you would please share the feedback that you get with us, we would be so grateful, because I think it's incumbent on us to be updating this and making it as useful as possible. So we'd love to hear what you hear in response to the presentations. Email me. I know any Lori, Susanna, and I would all be happy to get the information, talk to you on the phone, however you want to do it. And then on that note, we would like your feedback on the presentation and the messaging and anything else we've captured in notes, things that people have mentioned just in the course of today's presentation. But please email us with what has been helpful about this presentation? What additional information would you like? Do you feel like you would need to really feel comfortable making a presentation or integrating this into your outreach or intake? You could put it in the chat right now, and we'll capture that. You could email us. I have made an error, and it looks like Susanna's the only one who wants to get emails from you, but I'll make sure that you have Lori and my emails as well. That was totally unintentional, Susanna. Sorry about that. But please, even if it's just one quick email to any of the three of us, like, this was good, but you need to explain this more. I don't get it. And if I don't get it, my community organization is not going to get it. Please, we'd really appreciate hearing that. And now it's only Susanna who's saying thank you, and it's only Susanna who's open to getting emails from you. I'm so sorry. Actually, I could probably add it in right now. But that's it for the presentation, and we have about 15 more minutes, and I'd like to invite people to leave if you would like to leave and get 15 minutes of your life back, but also stay and ask questions if you'd like to. I will certainly be around. I think Susanna and Lori can stay, and anyone else who wants to stay and just listen and talk, or just, yeah, talk about this subject at all. We'd really love that. But at this point, that's the end of our slides, and thank you so much for plugging in today. Thank you so much for being interested in this. I think this is an important turning point sort of in our world right now. There's been so much anti-immigrant sentiment for the past 4 or 5 years. Not that it didn't exist before that, but it's been so heightened that it really, we can't just assume we'll all go back to how it was before. We need to work to make things better, and this is part of that work. So thank you for engaging in that. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And yeah, special thank you to Kelsey and Valentine and Maria Romero for giving us some really, really important on the ground advice and insight.
So Beth, is this designed to be a 60, 90-minute presentation? And also, is there a shorter version that could be incorporated into a workers' rights presentation?
Well, so it's designed to be, I think it's actually probably about a 40-minute presentation, and then like with a little bit of time for questions. So our thoughts were that you could cut and paste from it and, you know, take out what you might take out, but I'd also be happy to, I'd be happy to suggest what might come out. However, those suggestions would probably be really deeply based in what your presentation was going to be about, or what group in the community you were talking to. So if you're talking to mostly undocumented immigrants, then you could cut out the parts about how to, best practices for applying for benefits, because they're not the kinds of benefits that they can access. Most don't have the same application and reporting requirements. Actually, some do, but some don't. So that might be something to take out if you're talking mostly to undocumented immigrants. But I think we can make suggestions for just paring down. Also, if I'm sure you've all done this, you can sort of decide yourself what's probably a little less important, and just like not talk much about a slide. Just say, yep, these are good. You want to, do a good job applying, gather your documents, and not say anything else about that. And that's a way to shorten the presentation as well. What do you think, Valentine? What would be most helpful in figuring out how to focus the presentation and make it shorter for you?
I mean, what I'm thinking is usually what we try to do is we try to keep it, to 60 minutes, unless we're being specifically asked to do a 90-minute presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's just so much to cover when it comes to farm workers,
Mm-hmm.
heat stress, wildfire smoke. And so, we're always finding ourselves trying to not include some of the topics, but they're all very critical in including public benefits and public charge. But what I'm thinking would be most helpful for me is to be able to send you what I have used in the past and incorporate some of the slides. And if one of you could look at it and see, I think you deleted, a slide that should be included. I think I would feel much comfortable doing it that way.
I think that sounds like a great idea. And we could also, Lori and Susanna and I could also get together and just try to make a teeny version. Like if you were just inserting this into a longer presentation, what would a tiny version of this be? So maybe we could do both, Valentine. So I would be happy to. And
yeah, and I was going to say, Beth, I think because we really didn't go into depth with the true and false questions, or if the presenter does decide to, add any questions or anything in the sense that it would be longer. I think it would probably be about a 90-minute presentation. But yeah, like you said, we could come up with a shorter version of it, or even we could suggest which slides to include depending on the type of presentation that the person is doing, and they just wanted to quickly talk about public charge or public benefits. Like if your presentation is about housing, maybe we could suggest, oh, these are sort of like the slides that you could integrate into that presentation to make it make sense and still not make your presentation super long.
that's a really good idea, Susanna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Valentine. It's a really good point. Like a lot of times you have like a couple sentences for each topic. You don't have 40 minutes or 60 minutes for one topic. So yeah. So let us work on creating some like super mini version. But in addition to, I think any three of us would be happy to look at like what you put into your outreach. Yeah. Anybody else have anything they'd like to ask about or chat about, or any experiences you'd like to share? Any other good suggestions? I really loved Valentine's suggestion for just like getting people talking right at the beginning to sort of set the tone for this is an interactive. It's okay. It's a safe place to talk. I think that's so much easier in person than it is on Zoom. So good work being doing a good job of that over the computer.
Well, I have to say thank you all. I have to step out and go do some childcare before I dive into another presentation. It has been great. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Valentine. Great to see you, and thank you so much for helping. Anybody else have a question, concern, input? Don't forget to email us with your input about the presentation. I can't see everybody who's still on because I'm still, I don't need to share my screen anymore, I guess. There we go. Okay, well, nobody has, wait, did I look at the chat? Were there any questions? No. Nope, I don't think so. Susanna was on top of it. Thank you, Susanna.
I did. Did you respond to Joan Marie's question?
I did not see Joan Marie's question. Let me scroll.
Oh,
up.
Maybe
yes,
Susanna did. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I thought about consulting with Beth and Lori about it first. But basically, she asked if one of us or anybody could record this training, and then we could upload it to like Facebook or YouTube and share it with folks. Yeah, which, I also believe it's a really, really great idea. And I think that training could be like, like an hour long or so, and would be basically, at least from what I understood, like going through the template PowerPoint.
You know what? We're going to get that on July 6th. We're doing this presentation basically for Oregon Health Authority for all their community. Oh God, I'm blanking on the name. The assisters, all the assisters. and there's going to be one in English and then one in Spanish later in the afternoon. So, and they record those and there'll be a link to them. So I think
So
we're
Beth,
going to
would you
get that.
mind including that on the email where you sent everyone the PowerPoints and everything? That way we can kind of answer Joanne's question that there
Yeah.
will be a recorded, and that way everyone knows too.
Yeah.
That there
Okay.
will be a recorded presentation.
I just learned something, that the chat cuts out when your internet fails, because I don't have that. I scrolled up. It's not on there anywhere. So I didn't get the chat from while I was disappeared. Jessica, do you feel empowered to do a public charge presentation? How do you feel?
Yes.
Great. Well,
We
don't
could do
hesitate.
with a little help first, but this was really great. So
Well, yes, reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out. Yeah, I think Kelsey said something really important, which is that every presentation, no matter how experienced you are, something comes up that you don't know. And I sometimes, like, I'm used to, I'm old, so I'm used to saying, I don't know. I'm gonna have to look it up and get back to you. But sometimes I forget that if you haven't had to say that a lot, it can feel really uncomfortable. But it is fine to say that. It is honest. It actually lends credibility to people who say that they're not just like they're not just trying to make something up. They're saying, I don't know, but I'll find out. All right, well, I think we might be able to close, unless I'll give one last chance. Anybody wanting to ask a question or give some, I'm happy to take input now. I'll take notes if you want to give input on the presentation. Okay. Well, thank you guys, Lori and Susanna and Kelsey. Thank you so much for presenting. Thank you, everybody else. Thank you for being willing to listen and take this information and go forth into the community with it.
Thank you, Beth.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Beth.
Good to see you
Guys,
all.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.